The world spends literally trillions of dollars overcoming friction. So the first question, does anybody care, and would they be willing to pay for a solution? The answer is absolutely yes.
Everybody.
I've always been a big believer in the theory of open innovation, right? Which is, it doesn't matter where the innovation comes from. Create partnerships with the innovators, create mutual benefit, and bring their technology into the organization and deploy it to create value. It's a piece of work that in the past would have taken a skilled analyst months, and we were able to get the knowledge and information we needed literally in like 2 hours.
Welcome everybody to the second episode of Asset Life. Today we have an awesome guest, Dr. Bill Bender, Chief Innovation Officer at Duravi. Hi Bill, thanks for joining the show.
Hey Alex, good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right. You've done something pretty remarkable in a demanding sport. You raced at the HYROX World Championship in Stockholm against the best in the world in your age group. Sports clearly been the defining part of your life for a long time. Why? And for those who don't know, what's HYROX?
Yeah, as I have an extensive background in the sport of triathlon with the background of running and swimming, and after a few decades of trying that sport, I thought it would be a really interesting challenge to try a new one. So about a year and a half ago or so, I learned about a new sport. It's CrossFit racing called HYROX, and it's pretty much global now, several million participants. And it's a combination of running and CrossFit exercises put into a standardized race format. And so the HYROX organization has a couple of hundred races around the world during the year. And then if you're fortunate enough to win one of those events, which my partner and I were, then you get invited to the World Championships, which were in Stockholm in June.
That's amazing. Inside that athlete, there's a chemistry kit, right? And here's what strikes me. Endurance, sport, and industrial chemistry reward the same thing. Small, correct decisions added up over time, not the big dramatic move. Did the athlete teach a chemist, or the chemist teach the athlete, or how did you arrive at both at the same
They really were kind of simultaneous, right? Because I really started my athletic career when I was in high school and college. And you're right, there's interesting similarities. There's lots of small steps and analysis and experimentation and trying new things and new training techniques, or learning something new about racing, right? And in the scientific community, it's a constant journey like that, right? I mean, the technology evolves and changes over time. As one changes roles through times, there's a whole new set of information and knowledge and capabilities to learn as you go through a career. So there's a lot of analogies between the two.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you that question, because they seem linked. They seem like one go with the other and have some similarities. So
one's a little more mental and one's a little more physical, but
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's all about human performance, right? So
Correct.
both sides are important.
And the more work and the more detail you put into it, the more successful you can be.
Agreed. You spent the early part of your career in the lab, right? At some point, you stepped out of the beaker into the business of helping other people's breakthroughs.
Yeah.
What made you make that jump?
I think really interest level, right? I getting a degree in chemistry, kind of the expectation when you come out of school is that you'll do something in the lab, right? To develop a piece of science, right? Honestly, I was never really very good at that part. I didn't find it very interesting, but what I really enjoyed was the ability to take technical innovations and drive them into operational or commercial success. And so pretty early on in my career, it was a decision. I really wanted to work in the innovation space, and I've been fortunate enough to do that in a variety of fields throughout the last 30 years or so. But for me, it was really around interest and the best way that I figured that I could create value for where I was working.
So you feel like you had like an investor mindset early on, like that was what you were going for?
I didn't think of it that way at the time, but really, the first few roles I had in that kind of space was really internal entrepreneurs who were developing new technology for the companies or businesses that I was working for at the time, right? And it's fairly similar, right? You have to go through a series of steps to develop technology, commercialize it, convince stakeholders that they should invest in it, deploy it, test it, right? And then prove commercial feasibility and value creation long-term, right? And whether it's an internal entrepreneur to the enterprise where you're working or an external entrepreneur who's developing technology that you want to bring into the business, there's a lot of similarities.
All right.
It
That
wasn't
makes a
until
lot of sense.
later on in my career, really, where it became more heavily focused on open innovation or external innovation, where the ideas of others from outside the enterprise were being brought in to create
All
value
right.
through partnership with the business where I was working.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, so when you work in this innovation lab, you just didn't back up some promising startups. The whole idea was something called creative innovation, right? Or
Creative
destructive.
disruption, yeah, or creative
Yeah, yeah,
innovation.
yeah. Is how does that work, and is it kind of different from the usual investment playbook?
Well, so if we talk about kind of the later portions of my career where I was working in an innovation and investing business, right? Our goal was really twofold. One was to invest in really high quality entrepreneurs that would create economic return. But then a major part of my role in that part of my career was to try to find technologies that we could invest in, that we could also bring in and deploy into the enterprise, right? And that was really done to drive innovation, to drive creative destruction, to find new technologies, right? Because when you think about it, I've always been a big believer in the theory of open innovation, right? Which is, it doesn't matter where the innovation comes from. Create partnerships with the innovators, create mutual benefit, and bring their technology into the organization and deploy it to create value, right? And so for most of my career, that was internal innovators, but for the last 7, 8, 9 years, it's really been more focused on external innovators. And when you think about that, I mean, it's really evident now in the world of AI, right? If you think about how much the world really knows, an
Yeah,
enterprise or an individual can only know a tiny fraction, a very tiny fraction of what the world knows, right? And so if you have a problem to be solved, right, it's much more likely that there's an external person who solved it for another need or another business or for some other reason, that you can bring their ideas and time to yours and create innovation for the business. It's really kind of
right.
the term open innovation or external innovation.
Yeah,
Investing is really kind of very similar to that, right? You're looking for external folks who have great ideas and new technology that you can partner with, and that partnership can be an investment in their business, and or it can be bring their technology to the enterprise and deploy it. And you'd be surprised, the innovators who invent new technology and are looking for investors are very happy to have both of those, because really the two things that are lifeblood for them are sales and investment, right?
I think, and just reflecting a little bit, I feel like when you're doing that open innovation, you have the back of a company that can understand their vertical, it helps you get to that product market fit faster, right? Because you're not stumbling upon where does this innovation land, what's the best use case. You can have that in advantage. Plus, second, you have industrial real use cases, industrial data that you can test your hypothesis against. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, on the first part of your question, the places that I've been fortunate enough to work and some of the amazing innovators, engineers, chemists, scientists that I've worked with over my career have been fantastically amazing, right? And they've invented some amazing things, but they tend to focus their solution space in an area that they know very well, right? And
Okay.
oftentimes they may not be aware that there are other spaces, other technology areas, other types of techniques that can creatively solve the problems that are important in the business, right? And so by going externally and leveraging both internal and external, you dramatically broaden the playing field where you can find opportunities to create value, right? And then,
That
yeah,
makes
I've had the good fortune to work for a couple of very large industrial enterprises. And when
Mhm.
you partner with entrepreneurs or inventors outside, they're generally very pleased to have access to the opportunities and the resources and the knowledge within an enterprise like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. I was in a conference earlier this year, and there was somebody from MIT, and she claimed that that partnership between academia and the industry needs to be stronger because academia gives you the method, but then the industry gives you the real use case and the actual data, so you can prove that, so you can prove
Yeah.
your technology and your ideas on that, which you don't
Those
have
type,
in academia.
yeah, those types of relationships are very interesting because there's really a third part, right? That I've really learned over the years. There needs to be an inventive step, right? And oftentimes what you see in universities, particularly high quality institutions like MIT, you see an inventive step, right? And then on the industrial side, you have an industrial need But what's often missing in the middle is kind of the development of that innovation into a business, right? And I spent a lot of time earlier in my career, particularly when I was working for industrial enterprise, we would have ties to places like MIT. And there was always this level of frustration with senior management. Well, we're spending this time and money with MIT, but we're not really, or any other university, I'm not just singling them out, with a series of universities. And there's not a lot of technology that we can bring directly and put into our business, right? And that's because there often requires this step of kind of development and commercialization. Because an enterprise like Dow Chemical or Koch Industries, we can't really go take an idea, a raw idea from MIT and commercialize it. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
So where we've seen more successes where universities like that, and MIT is a great example, where they have incubation engines, right, to help the inventors form that idea into a small business that they can get funded, develop, and commercialize and support the technology. And then we in industry can buy it from them and deploy it with some support and background in there. So really good learnings around that. And what you've seen really over the last decade, or what I've seen over the last decade, is many of the top universities that have research programs that want to have an industrial tie. Again, MIT, a great example. They have innovation engines or incubation engines or some other type of entity that funds and helps the entrepreneurs develop it into a business. It makes that interface with industry go much more smoothly. Takes more time, but it increases the chance of success.
Yeah, it reduces the risk of failing, because it's a large amount of people that try to start something and fail. I think this is one of the key things. Yes,
it's really difficult for a large company that's running large operational assets to take a very new idea that's not developed commercially,
which is critical. Something fails, there's actual physical consequences on people, environment, etc. Yeah, it's not like, I have something online you can try, like a new editor for YouTube videos. It's completely a different space. Industrially, you have to be more careful, right?
Exactly. I mean, you think about the scale of the enterprise and the strong desire for environmental and safety performance, right? And operational reliability, and the cost of downtime is massive, right? So there's a lot of it's a lot of conservative nature in making sure that the things that go into these types of operations are going to perform very well. Not only going to create the value that they're intended or advertised to create, but aren't going to cause any unintended consequences on the side.
Yes, that's definitely key, at least in industrial, and now industrial AI, which is the newest thing with the revolution of AI. Which brings me to an interesting question. Say a technology lands in front of you. What are you actually looking at? The person who built it, the problem they're chasing, the technology itself? You're not allowed to say all of them. I know they're all important, but there must be something that stands out for you, I imagine. I want to know what you trusted the most when you had to make a call.
Yeah, there's really, if you think about that from a technology investor standpoint, so I'm thinking about my last role with Koch, investing and then deploying tech into the enterprise, right? The first question I always asked was, and I'm just kind of bluntly, does anybody care, right? In other words, will somebody pay for this, right? Does it create enough value, and is that value well enough understood that a customer, internal or external, would be willing to put up money to, obtain the technology and deploy it, right? And then the second question is, can they actually do it, right? And when you're looking at fairly early technology, there oftentimes is, you got to kind of prove it to us that you can really do what you say, because some of your ideas sound a little crazy, right? Seen some really interesting entrepreneurs who invented things that just astounding, right? And just as a side note, the last 8 years, all the interesting technology I've gotten to see, it's really, there's an amazing future coming, right? There's an amazing future in so many fields, right? And we're seeing it now with the advent of AI, but industrial, materials, healthcare, there's amazing innovation coming in all those spaces. But the two things that I really look for is, number one, does anybody care? Will somebody pay? Does it create value, right? And secondly is, can they do what they say, right? And if both of those things are true, both of those are positive, then oftentimes we're very willing to take the technology and try it out, to do some deployments and some early commercialization and see how it goes. Right. And then if it's successful, some of the things that we've done that way were super successful, got deployed across wide portions of the enterprise, and some not so much. And they need to go back to the drawing board or continue to refine the technology. From an investing standpoint, then you often add in, okay, the quality of the entrepreneur and the quality of the enterprise, right? And the types of things that you need to do to decide if you want to provide significant capital.
Yeah, and now with the era of AI, before we had a lot of slideware, right? Everything worked on the slide, everything looked amazing on the slide, and then it took you so much time to get to something actual, like you can actually work on and test that MVP that we call. But nowadays, like doing a prototype with some of these tools, it takes you maybe days if you're really detailed. Like the time to get the technology to a point where you can actually see and prove it's tremendously accelerated these times.
It's really interesting that you bring that up, because kind of selfishly, I look at it this way: AI and the advent of AI and the tools that we see now have proven my hypothesis that innovation is much faster and more successful when you can take into account the knowledge outside of the enterprise. Right? And you really think about what AI does, it aggregates the knowledge of mankind, right? Or significant
Yes.
portions of it, right? And can go out and find aspects that we as humans would never see. Right? So it's
Yeah.
really, from an innovation standpoint, it's the ultimate open innovation. Right. And
Yeah.
as
And
a relatively new user of the technology over the last year or so, I've been continuously astounded, right, as you mentioned, at the rapid pace at which you can collect information. Not 100% of it's perfect, and not all of it's exactly
no,
right.
not at
Still
all.
needs the human touch and the understanding and the planning and the strategy part. But the ability to go out and look for a solution to a problem or an answer to a question, what used to take, we in fact, we just did one this past week, right? And I don't need to go into the details, but it's a piece of work that in the past would have taken a skilled analyst months, right? And we were able to get the knowledge and information we needed literally in like 2 hours.
Agreed.
So
Yeah.
it's a tool. These are tools that are going to make everybody more effective in their role, right? And if you're not using those tools, you're going to get left behind quickly. So
Oh, very quickly. Yes, very quickly. Um, and going to that point, I think what you said about innovation, right? And your hypothesis, which has been proven, I agree with you, because AI, what it does is it amplifies your source page. You know something, but now you have this amount of lateral ways you can go with still your core, but you can move laterally so much that you
instantly,
can bring ideas from other industries that
yeah.
10 years ago you had to had a PhD or you had to hire that person to bring that knowledge into your innovation. Now you can just have certain level of understanding and connect the dots much easier than before.
Yeah. And even in one's field, right? I mean, I'm a trained chemist by background, right? I haven't practiced, very much in my career, as we talked about earlier, but, and just in the field of chemistry, I mean, there are literally millions of topics, millions, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it touches
Yeah.
everything, right? Literally everything. And if you include biochemistry, it touches literally everything, right? And getting asked a question in a particular field in the past would have involved a lot of research or digging or reading or refreshing or talking to experts, as you mentioned, or consultations with consultants. Now with the tools that can access that knowledge, right? And I've had a number of these in this role since I started in April, where I needed to increase my knowledge rapidly in a particular field. And in an hour, I can know enough to proceed with what I'm working on, right? It would have taken me an hour just to figure out what I was going to do in the past, right?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Started,
Yes.
right? Where am I going to find this
Yes.
information? And now some of these tools are so powerful. It's like having a conversation with a handful of world-class experts live on your computer.
Correct. You're not bouncing ideas on yourself or waiting for a meeting to see
Open
what your
innovation
boss and your
again, right?
peers think. Yes. So, Bill, you recently joined Duravi as the Chief Innovation Officer. What are you up to these days?
Yeah, it was a really interesting opportunity that came up as I was retiring from my main career to take a role with one of the startups that I had met during my time. And it's really intriguing because they have a really interesting technology. It's in the lubrication space, which is a fairly mature, commoditized, not a huge amount of innovation in that
Mm-hmm.
space. And they've developed a new technology that operates differently. So most lubricants work by putting a thin coating of a variety of materials, oils, and other things on the surface of a metal, right? The Duravi technology is really interesting because instead of lubricating the metal, it actually changes the surface of the metal, right?
Okay.
And smoothens and flattens and makes it more amenable to the oils and other lubricants that are added. So it's fairly universal. It's very disruptive, really interesting technology. And when they approached me, it sounded like a really great, interesting technology with a really interesting team. Primarily, we're focused right now on continuing to advance the science and our understanding of how broad this technology can be developed and applied. And we're in the fairly early stages of revenue generation. So we're at the inflection point now where the customer base is growing significantly. So we're trying to drive both the innovation and the commercialization.
So Bill, I'm curious that does this company meet your 3-question criteria?
They absolutely do, right? And so the interesting thing, if you think about the lubrication market, right, the world spends literally trillions of dollars overcoming friction, right? The cost, the materials, the carbon generation, right? There's a huge amount of effort in lubricating engines and equipment and really a whole range of things. So the first question, does anybody care, and would they be willing to pay for a solution? The answer is absolutely yes.
Everybody.
The market potential is super broad and it's massive, right? Right. And then the second question, can they do what they say? The answer is absolutely yes, they can, right? And it's a new field of science with a new technology,
Yeah.
so it takes a little while to convince some of the folks who run rotating equipment and engines and things that this type of technology can work very differently but create value. After seeing dozens of demos and dozens of customer success stories, absolutely the company can do what they say. And they have a pretty bright future, I believe.
Let me finish with this. It's been an amazing conversation, but I want to know, which is, of all your years and experience and working with all these startups, which is the one that you cross the line with, that you always go back to that example because it was a great technology and it was a great journey. And if you can describe a little bit the journey and what do you think it made it successful?
Yeah, there's a bunch that I could pick from, and I think I'd like to pick one or two from my last role at Koch, where we were doing tech investing, and there were a few innovators in the healthcare space, which I'm not an expert
Okay.
in, so I'm relatively easy to astound in that space, I think. But
Yes.
knowing enough about healthcare, there's a particular company that has the ability to take a pint of whole blood from a cancer patient, put that blood into a completely automated robotic system, and a week later comes out the immune T cells from that patient modified to fight the specific cancer that they have.
Wow.
It's just unbelievable. I mean, it's mind-boggling that, this, and the series of technologies that this robotic system executes, each one of them is relatively known to science, right?
Yeah.
These are the first people that aggregated these set of technologies to be able to make patient-specific immunotherapies based on their own T cells, their own immune cells, to fight the specific cancer, right? Now, at the time, there were only 6 or 8 FDA-approved ways to do this, but there are thousands more in the pipeline, and someday it's possible that this type of tool is really going to help millions of people to fight and defeat cancer, right? And where they have had FDA-approved treatments and where they have had success, the remission, the reoccurrence rates are very low because these cells remain in your body and propagate for the rest of your life, right? So it's just amazing what's possible. And I do want to mention a second one, again, in the healthcare space, which was an investment that the business did a number of years ago. There's a company that's figured out a way to create an array of ultrasonic transducers and send ultrasonic energy into your body, typically in your brain, and focus it in a very narrow point and do ablation of very narrow parts of the brain. Huh. Right. So there's the one treatment that, and you can go look this company up. It's amazing technology. They tie it to an MRI machine. They're able to do things like fight addiction, right? So there are very specific centers in the brain that lead to addiction. If they can ablate those and kill those few cells, they can help people to fight addiction. Right? There are other people that have tremors, right? They just shake like this uncontrollably.
Yeah.
Disorders.
Like Parkinson, something like that.
Parkinson's is one that they're, at least as of my last knowledge, looking at, but other types of tremor disorders.
Okay.
The MRI can show in the brain where that's being caused. They can focus all these ultrasonic beams to a very narrow point, ablate a small group of cells. And you see the videos of these people before the treatment, I mean, they can't even hold anything. And when they're done, it's gone. Right? It's simply
Wow.
amazing. So it's what I mentioned a few minutes ago. Really, there's so many fields now where the amount of innovation that's coming from entrepreneurs in the U.S. and around the world, it's astounding, right? And the next 20 years are just going to be amazing for society, particularly in healthcare, I'm predicting. And those are just two. I mean, we literally have seen dozens and dozens of other companies that are
Dozens,
doing
yes.
amazing things, both in the technology and the management and the paying system. And really, the healthcare system is going to be dramatically innovated over the next decade.
And we need it because it's so sad to see all these people, family, friends die of this type of diseases that just could
Exactly.
affect you at any time, right? Nobody's immune to them, so it's amazing that we're making these breakthroughs. And was that before the era of AI, or do you know if they're
These were
included
both
in
before,
anything?
right? And
Okay.
what excites me even more, right? You think about open innovation in healthcare, right? I mean, the science of medicine is astoundingly complicated, right? And it's
Yes.
astoundingly large, right? And the thing that's really exciting to me about AI is, are there tie points among the knowledge sets that today don't connect, where AI could draw some connections that will help us to do, drug design and efficacy studies much faster, to
Faster,
propose
yes.
new types of cures or treatments that take parts from 3 different fields that people in the past didn't see those connections, right? And allow us to get to some of these solutions more rapidly.
Amazing. Well, Bill, thank you so much for making the time to talk to us today. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and hope to see you
Appreciate the
again soon.
invitation. Thank you. Good luck to
All
you.
right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.